Déclaration.
Statements by members.
Statements by members.
The Honourable Member for... Order. Order. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, 2 petitions have been tabled in this House concerning the Energy East pipeline project. One from Quebecers who say no to this project because it goes against our values and our interests, and one from English Canada, and which says yes to a pipeline transporting dirty oil through Quebec without giving the people of Quebec a say. 2 petitions, Mr. Speaker. One from Quebec, which says no to Energy East. No to having this pipeline shoved down our throats. No to a project where Quebec runs all the risks but receives no benefits. Another petition, which says yes. Yes to Energy East, with or without the consent of Quebec. For the Bloc Québécois, the choice is simple. Quebecers must be heard. It's up to Quebec and only Quebec to decide, and it's time that this government understood that.
Member for St. Catharines.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's not that as if one needs an excuse to bend elbows with fellow community members, but I have a perfect one happening this weekend. Niagara is famous for many things. Niagara Falls, rolling hills, beautiful landscapes, 2 great lakes and beautiful beaches. However, only one Niagara specialty gets a 2-week celebration every September. If you haven't figured it out yet, I'm talking about fine Niagara wine. I often hear from fellow members talk about local festivals and fairs, but call me biased for believing that the Niagara Wine Festival takes the trophy as best in class. Thank you. For over 65 years, patrons have come from across Canada to enjoy beautifully transformed Montebello Park and celebrate a year's harvest of world-class Niagara grapes. With over 29 vintners set up to promote and provide samples of their wine, there's just no comparison to the Niagara Wine Festival. On behalf of residents, I'd like to congratulate organizers and volunteers for another successful year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Barrie-Innisfil.
I was honored to be part of the Terry Fox Run this past weekend, along with over 1,000 runners and walkers of all ages. The Barrie Terry Fox Run, which is held annually along the shores of beautiful Kempenfelt Bay, has raised more than $2 million since its inception, and this has been without the help of any corporate sponsors. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to specifically recognize one individual's incredible and tireless advocacy on behalf of cancer research. Local icon Will Dwyer has single-handedly collected approximately $750,000 for the Terry Fox Run over the past 36 years. And, Mr. Speaker, this unsung Canadian hero isn't done yet. He hopes to reach $1 million before he hangs up his running shoes. On behalf of the people of Barrie-Innisfil, I want to thank Mr. Dwyer from the bottom of my heart, and I hope this story inspires a new generation of Canadians to continue on with his legacy.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
The Honourable Member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize September as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. The month is dedicated toward engaging and connecting with Canadians around a disease that 1 in 8 men will be diagnosed with in their lifetime. Through community fundraising events, public service and research announcements, Prostate Cancer Canada attempts to alert people to the most common cancer in men. Our riding of Vaughan Woodbridge will be one of 6 communities across Canada hosting a breakfast for Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. The last 20 years has seen a death rate from prostate cancer drop by almost 40%, but still an estimated 4,100 Canadian men died from the disease in 2015 alone. There is still a lot of work to be done to decrease the death toll further, and the increased awareness that comes from Prostate Cancer Awareness Month is a great place to start. Please join me in attending an event, raising funds, or just sharing information about Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, September is World Alzheimer's Month, and today is World Alzheimer's Day. The theme for these events is Remember Me, and it couldn't be more appropriate. Today, we must remember those who are living with Alzheimer's and their caregivers. As a country, we need to be doing everything we can to support our friends, our neighbours, and our communities who have been impacted by this condition. We can do this in a number of ways, committing to more research, better understanding, and ultimately achieving prevention and a cure are our ultimate goals. I'm sure that everyone in this chamber has been touched by Alzheimer's disease in some way through our families and friends. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask all of us to remember them and to honor them by working together to eliminate Alzheimer's and all other forms of dementia.
The honourable member for Scarborough-Agincourt.
Mr. Speaker, today we join the Armenian community here in Canada, in Armenia, and around the world in celebrating the country's 25th Independence Day. As chair of the Canada-Armenia Parliamentary Friendship Group and as an MP for my riding in Scarborough-Agincourt, which represents a vibrant Armenian community, I'm honored to join my colleagues here today in celebrating this significant milestone. Canada and the Republic of Armenia enjoy a dynamic and friendly relationship. As Canadians, we continue to support our Armenian friends, whether it's through our shared values of democracy, freedom, bilateral relations, or through our continued recognition of the Armenian genocide that was successfully established here in the House of Commons. Today, we reflect on the important contributions of the Armenian community here in Canada, not only towards our national fabric, but also through the demonstration of leadership by showing what it truly means to be Canadian during the Syrian refugee crisis. I invite all my colleagues in joining me to offer our best wishes to the Armenian community on this important milestone as we continue to look forward to many more celebrations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, I wish to salute the work and influence of Mr. Jean-Louis Belland, a former member of the National Assembly for my riding. Passionately committed to his community, his roots are in agriculture, where he studied and worked as a poultry and tree farmer. Mr. Belland has always stood up for our democracy, and because of his conviction, he remains today a well-known and well-loved figure in our region. Throughout his career, he has been, among others, MNA for the Ralliement Crétiste in Lotbinière, mayor of the municipality of Saint-Gilles, founder of the Caisse d'Établissement Belle-Rive in Saint-Romuald, president of the Office of Wood Producers of Lotbinière, vice president of the Lotbinière Mutual Insurance, and member of several boards of directors. Proud fourth-degree Knight of Columbus, for many years there can be no doubt that Mr. Belland has made a huge contribution to our community. Today in the House, I am very happy to honour this great and kind man. Thank you, Mr. Jean-Louis Belland.
The honourable member for Vancouver Quadrat.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to remember a former colleague and dear friend whose passionate voice and courage continue to resonate within our Parliament. Through his many years of service and throughout his battle with ALS, Maurice Bélanger was, to the very end, a stellar example to all parliamentarians. Maurice is survived by his dedicated and loving wife and partner, Catherine, and we wish Catherine and their family all our love and warm wishes through this difficult time. I had the honour of working alongside Maurice for 8 years. He was a mentor to new MPs, and none of us will forget his infectious enthusiasm as he shared his latest innovative project to serve constituents. Maurice was a bright light for his community, colleagues, party, and country, and this chamber will be dimmer without him. Thank you, Maurice, for how generously you gave of yourself. You are very much missed.
Member for Etobicoke Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today marks the 75th anniversary of the Babin Yar massacre. On this date in 1941 in Kiev, 34,000 Jewish men, women, children, and infants were rounded up, stripped of their possessions, shot, and dumped into the Babin Yar ravine by the Nazis. So began the Holocaust by bullets in Eastern Europe. This week, a series of memorial events are being held on this horrific anniversary. The Babin Yar Memorial Project was spearheaded by the Ukrainian Jewish Encounter, a groundbreaking group founded and funded by Ukrainian-Canadian businessman and visionary James Timurtay. Thousands of forgotten Holocaust by bullet sites are deserving of remembrance. One such site is at the ancient Jewish cemetery of Sambir, where on the first day of Passover in 1943, 2,000 Jews were massacred. After 7 years of patient and meticulous work, my friend Mark Fryman and I signed a memorandum of understanding with the mayor of Sambir, Yuri Hamar, this September 8th to memorialize this site. Mr. Speaker, May their souls be bound in the bonds of eternal life.
Wonderful.
The honourable member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As members of Parliament, we're afforded many challenges and opportunities in our daily lives. To help us with these challenges, we are blessed to be able to have staff to help us along the way. And I'm rising today to pay tribute to one of my staff. Christine Risky has been in my employment since my first election on January 23, 2006, and before that worked for Dale Johnson, the previous MP, for 6 years. Christine is retiring at the end of this month after 17 years of loyal service to the people of Central Alberta. Christine hails from an era where people came to work no matter what. So today I'd like to say thank you to Christine, who is in Ottawa with her husband, Dwayne. Thank you for making sure the office was always open, rain, shine, or blizzard. Thank you for taking call after call from constituents who needed assistance, many of them desperate and at their wits' end. Thank you for making sure the office was fully supplied, that deadlines were always met, invoices were always paid, and important tasks were always done. Thank you for your patience, understanding, your wisdom, and your guidance. Thank you for your friendship. You will be missed. I wish you and Dwayne good health and a long, fun, and wonderful retirement.
Hear, hear, hear.
Sadly, she's too shy to get up. The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, as chair of the Liberal Aerospace Caucus, I'd like to give a warm welcome to the Aerospace Industries Association of Canada, who are hosting Aerospace Day on the Hill today.
Aerospace is one of Canada's leading innovation and export industries. We are home to over 700 businesses, which provide 180,000 high-quality jobs. Every year, the aerospace sector contributes over $29 billion to Canada's economy and GDP.
The Canadian aerospace industry is a large economic driver in our country, and it includes engineering, manufacturing, in-service support for everything from planes to helicopters to satellites, spaceships, and more. The aerospace industry is not only a passion of mine, but it is an important part of the innovation agenda and an integral part of Canadian economy. So thank you, AIAC, and welcome to Parliament Hill today.
The honourable member for Moncton Riverview Dieppe.
I rise today to bring awareness on the impact of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia that has on Canadians. I know the personal toll that it can have on a family, as my mother lives with Lewy body dementia. Today is World Alzheimer's Day.
The resources of the Alzheimer's Society of New Brunswick will be put to use in a number of activities this week to raise money and to help the 17,000 family who take advantage of their services in New Brunswick, as well as the 3,000 people who will be diagnosed this year with Alzheimer's. The resources and networks that exist to help offer hope to those who deal with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Effects of dementia. They struggle to get information, they struggle to get a diagnosis, and they struggle to access services. Let us all take a moment today to acknowledge their efforts, to recognize their struggles, and to remind them that they are not alone. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alzheimer's disease is the leading form of dementia, accounting for over 2/3 of dementia cases in Canada. And many of us are justifiably afraid of this fatal disease. There's no cure for it. We don't know exactly what causes it, and we don't know why some get it and others don't. And sometimes we only talk about it in whispers. But I know this, Mr. Speaker, that the more we talk about Alzheimer's and the more knowledge that we share, the quicker we will get past the stigma and get to the people affected by this disease, the support and the care they need. So today, Mr. Speaker, in recognition of World Alzheimer's Day, I want to pay tribute to the caregivers, to the service providers, to the advocates in each and every province and territory across this great country, whose work it is to lessen the burden of those who have this disease. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
The Honourable Member for Honoré-Mercier. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise today to recognize the International Day of Peace. This day, which is rich in messages and symbols, was chosen by the UN to call attention to nonviolence and the end of conflict. International Day of Peace is celebrated every September 21st. It's dedicated to peace and especially to the absence of war. And it's symbolized by ceasefires in conflict zones. And it's observed by many countries and has been observed in many conflicts since 1981. This day, which is very symbolic, sends a message to the world of hope and peace. Whatever the conflict, whether it be internal between people or between nations, the hope is the same, that we see a day where all hostilities around the world stop, where there is a permanent peace, and where that becomes the rule and not the exception. The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, today, on this International Day of Peace, we celebrate the important role played by women in peace processes around the world.
When women's groups are included in peace processes and are at the table as negotiators, mediators, and witnesses to peace agreements, those agreements are far more likely to succeed over the long term.
Last month, I had the pleasure of meeting with women in Colombia and Guatemala who are actively working to build peace in their communities. Their work is further proof that Canada must support the full participation of women in peace building.
This year, Canada must ensure that the next National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security includes long-term financial and diplomatic support for women peace builders, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's the wise thing to do.
Yeah. Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to wish Armenians right across Canada and all around the world a very happy Independence Day. 25 years ago today, Armenians voted in favor of full independence from the Soviet Union after almost 7 decades under communist rule. Canada and the Republic of Armenia share an important relationship. Canada, of course, is home to a proud and hard-working Armenian community. Canada and Armenia have also signed a number of bilateral trade agreements. And furthermore, in 2006, the Government of Canada recognized the events of 1915 as genocide. Once again, Mr. Speaker, I would like to extend my best wishes to Armenians here in Canada and around the world. Happy Independence Day.
The Honourable Member for Hull-Hamlin.
Mr. Speaker, it is a great honor for me to rise in this House to celebrate the life of our friend and colleague, the man from Mattawa, the Honourable Maurice Bélanger.
I wish to salute his exceptional work for cultural communities, and more specifically for the Haitian community in Ottawa and the Ottawa region. After the earthquake in 2010, Maurice Bélanger launched a program to create 2 scholarships of excellence at the University of Ottawa and the Université du Québec en Outaouais for gifted students from the Haitian community of Ottawa-Gatineau. The scholarship for the University of Ottawa was completed in 2015 and has reached the sum of $100,000. The scholarship for the UQUO, which will be known as the Bourse Maurice Bélanger, is not finished yet. We still need to raise $30,000 to reach our goal of $100,000. These scholarships, like everything that Maurice Bélanger touched, will continue to make a difference in the daily lives of people here. Bravo, Maurice. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister back to this place called Parliament. I know that the economy hasn't been necessarily his top priority lately, so let me just update him. While he was away, our economy has completely stalled. Unemployment has gone up. 110,000 energy workers have lost their jobs. And what's the Prime Minister's solution? Raising existing taxes and bringing in new ones, like a new carbon tax and a whopping CPP tax hike. His high-tax, high-spending plan is not helping, it's hurting. When will the Prime Minister realize this plan is failing Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I thank the honourable member for her question. The fact is, like all parliamentarians, we were busy all summer meeting with Canadians, talking about their concerns, talking about the opportunities to grow the economy in meaningful ways. And that's why I'm so surprised to hear the honourable member criticize the fact that we raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% so we could lower them for the middle class. Not only are they so disconnected from their constituents that they didn't vote in favour of raising taxes on the wealthy so we could lower them on the middle class, but she continues to suggest maybe we shouldn't be raising taxes on the wealthiest. That didn't work for 10 years. That won't work now for them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Liberals confirmed their negotiations on an extradition treaty with China, a country whose justice system has one of the worst human rights records in the world. Our allies, like Australia, the US, and New Zealand, don't have treaties of this type with China. And just last month, the immigration minister said that this was off the table. So has there been a change in China's human rights record? What exactly changed between now and then? And why is the Prime Minister not being straight up with Canadians?
Honourable Prime Minister.
The change, Mr. Speaker, is that after 10 years of a government that was hot and cold with the world's second largest economy, we have created a dialogue that allows us to deal with difficult issues and deliver on priorities for Canadians, whether they be consular cases or whether they be investment opportunities for Canadian businesses and small and medium-sized businesses across the country accessing the Chinese consumer market. The fact is Canada has extraordinarily high standards for extradition treaties, and those will always be upheld with anyone around the world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is being shockingly naive about these issues. The Chinese government has orchestrated thousands of cyber attacks against Canada. And according to CSIS and the RCMP, has sent foreign agents into Canada without our permission. Canadians expect the Prime Minister to act in our national interest. So what possible benefit to Canada would an extradition treaty with China provide us?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
The benefit to Canada is having a high-level security dialogue where we can talk about issues that are important to us and issues that are important to the Chinese government. We continue to be strong in our values, in our principles, and our expectations of anyone we engage with around the world, but having a strong, robust relationship that allows us to create economic opportunities for Canadians and make gains on human rights and consular files is what the previous government was unable to do and is what Canadians expect this government to get done for them.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we recently learned that the Prime Minister is working with China on an extradition treaty. The Chinese justice system uses torture systematically and violates human rights. Yet that's commonplace. Does the Prime Minister not understand that our overture to China should encourage China to be more respectful of rights rather than violating them? Why is he prepared to compromise over human rights, the Right Honourable Prime Minister, after 10 years of delivering nothing in terms of progress with China-Canada relations, nothing on economic development, nothing on human rights? The previous government still doesn't understand that you need to have a strong relationship where you can talk about real things, where you can criticize, and where you can deliver on Canadians' priorities. This government will always defend Canadian law, and when it comes to any extradition treaty, we will have very high standards that will have to be met by anyone we're dealing with. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's been 26 days since the Liberals said they would send Canadian troops on a mission to sub-Saharan Africa. But we still can't get any straight answers out of them on what exactly the plan is or how it serves our national interest. This mission will be dangerous and Canadian troops could die. It's clear that the Prime Minister wants a seat at the UN Security Council. It is using our troops as a pawn to achieve his goal. The Prime Minister owes Canadians the facts about this dangerous mission. What's his real motivation, and are Canadians' lives worth it?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Canadians made it very clear that they want a government that re-engages constructively and positively on the world stage, not just for a question of moral responsibility because we're so incredibly lucky here in Canada, but also because we can create peace and security that will have positive impacts in Canada and around the world. Canada has a role to play, and we take that very seriously. At the same time, we will reflect carefully on how Canada can best engage and welcome all voices to weigh in on how we are going to be able to hold by Canadian high standards of success and create the impact we have in the world.
The Honourable Member for Outremont.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians also thought that they were electing a government that was going to respect Parliament. They wanted that change. Whether it's the Latvian deployment or any future peacekeeping mission, Parliament should be consulted and there must be a vote. Can the Prime Minister simply explain why he no longer believes that Parliament should have a right to vote on these important issues?
Prime Minister.
As I said many times throughout the election campaign and have said since, I have a deep respect for every parliamentarian and their capacity to represent the views of their citizens, of their constituents on a broad range of issues. I look forward to robust debate on many different issues over the coming months and indeed years as we look at the best way to actually serve Canadians on a broad range of issues. That's what Canadians expect, and that's what we're going to deliver.
Member for Outremont.
How about a vote?
The Immigration Minister promised that Canada would never sign an extradition treaty with China as long as they still had the death penalty. And yet, the Prime Minister will be meeting with the Chinese Prime Minister tonight to discuss it. An extradition treaty, he just confirmed it. So, who should Canadians believe? The Prime Minister or the Immigration Minister? Because they're both saying diametrically opposed things, the Right Honourable Prime Minister. We've always been very clear, Mr. Speaker. We have to engage with the Chinese government on many issues that are of concern to Canadians, and we listen to the Chinese government on their concerns. The fact is, we expect a very high level of behavior before we enter into an extradition treaty. We don't enter into these treaties with countries that have death penalties. That's something we changed versus the previous government because Canada always has to look out for people facing the death penalty. The Honourable Member of Outremont. In death penalty situations or in countries that practice the death penalty, there's a bit of a nuance in the language that the Prime Minister is trying to play with there. When it comes to climate change, Canada's wearing the dunce cap. Canadians have borne the brunt of successive Liberal and Conservative governments' failures to respond to this global threat. And now, after a glimmer of hope that things might finally change, the current Liberal government has chosen to adopt Stephen Harper's targets. How does the Prime Minister explain to Canadians this betrayal of future generations? I repeat, Mr. Speaker, I repeat, the Liberals adopted the Conservatives' targets. How do they explain this betrayal? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, for a long time, various governments, including ours, have talked targets, but no one has come up with a concrete plan that included a price on carbon, and that's precisely what we're going to do. All provinces have agreed that we need to reach these targets, that we need to respect the Paris Agreement, And we've all understood that putting a price on carbon is part of the solution. It's unanimous among the provinces. We're going ahead because Canadians expect us to reduce greenhouse gases. The honourable member for Outremont.
In Paris to restoring Canada's credibility on climate change. He can't download that. He can't subcontract it to the provinces. Canada signed. His platform says that Stephen Harper's targets are, quote, catastrophic. No applause. Now suddenly, Canadians are expected to look the other way while he hits copy-paste on the Conservative climate plan. Can the Prime Minister please explain whether his Environment Minister just got it wrong, or is he indeed offering no other climate change targets than those of Stephen Harper?
The Prime Minister.
The honourable member from Outremont, I think, makes a grave mistake when he talks about the Conservative government's plan. They had no plan on climate change. They had no plan on reducing emissions. And that's why we have put in place a concrete and realistic plan to reduce emissions.
Order. I'm having trouble hearing the answer. I know members all want to hear the answer. The Right Honourable Prime Minister has the floor. Order.
We are committed to working with the provinces because we know the only way to reduce emissions is to get everyone to agree. Just like the provinces agreed that we have to ratify Paris, just like the provinces agreed that we need to price carbon pollution. There is unanimity on that, and that's what we're moving forward on.
Order. Alors, honorable député de Lac-Saint-Jean.
The honourable member for Lac-Saint-Jean.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, all across the country, what people are talking about is jobs and decent wages. There are people who are willing to work. In Softwood, for example, there was 100 days of consultation promised, but there's still been nothing. Will the Prime Minister undertake today to help all families that depend on this industry, that there will be a deal that will satisfy Canadians? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. It's ironic, Mr. Speaker, to hear the member for Lac-Saint-Jean saying that because it was his government that did nothing to start the negotiations. Our government has gotten deeply into negotiations with the Americans from the get-go. The Quebec Management Council saluted the attention that the Trade Minister, the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, has paid to this issue. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary knows full well, I think, that he is not allowed to name people by name here in the House of Commons. He must refer to their title as a minister, for example. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the former Trade Minister. Mr. Speaker, the former Trade Minister had started discussions, but negotiations hadn't begun. But discussions had been started with our U.S. counterparts. And there was still a year left to the deal, but that time is almost up now. They can't blame the previous government. They're in office. They have to make the decisions. And they need to sign a deal in the best interests of Canadians. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the former government started nothing on this file. We took the file from the start and we consulted. There's unprecedented cooperation with producers and workers in forestry, as well as the provinces and territories. We're looking for a good deal for Canada, not any old deal at any price.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister personally signed off on $220,000 in moving expenses for his own political staff. Wow. The chief responsibility of the Prime Minister is to be honest and forthright with Canadians in this House. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about these expenses. They are wrong. I ask the Prime Minister will be honest with Canadians and rise today and tell us which of his friends received these outrageous payouts.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker, and I am proud to stand in this House and to share with Canadians that we built a diverse team of passionate, hardworking, extremely qualified Canadians to deliver the change people voted for. Many people moved across this country with their families and children to serve in Ottawa. As part of this process, some employees received help in relocating. There have been rules in place on relocation of public servants and political staff since the 1970s. In fact, the current rules for relocation have been in place since 2008 and have applied to every minister's office since. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Red Deer Lacombe.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister personally approved over $126,000 in moving expenses for one senior aide in the PMO. Now, I'm not sure what you can move for $126,000, but I imagine it's very fragile. People in Alberta are struggling and losing their homes, savings, and livelihoods. But this Prime Minister is more concerned with making sure his friends are compensated. How can the Prime Minister justify to struggling Albertans this absolutely ridiculous waste of money?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Again, thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker, and providing me the opportunity to share with Canadians that the party opposite should know what the current guidelines for relocation are, given they wrote them. Tens of thousands of Canadians applied to be part of the team of the mandate that this government was going to advance. We are proud of the diverse team of passionate, hardworking, extremely qualified Canadians that we hired to deliver the change that people voted for. Canadians expect public resources to be used responsibly and economically, and we are committed to living up to these expectations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I'm having trouble hearing the answers. Let's make sure whether we like them or not, we need to hear each side. Most members here can listen to things they don't like very quietly and sedately. The honourable member for Elgin Middlesex London.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, $1.1 million was handed to Liberal staffers moving to Ottawa for six-figure jobs. The Liberal House Leader herself provided over $70,000 to just one staffer. The rules say that it is at the Minister's discretion. Does the Minister think forking out $1 million to Liberal political staff is the best use of Canadian taxpayers' money?
Wow. Yeah. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's the party opposite that put the rules into place, and the rules were followed. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member for Elgin Middlesex London.
Mr. Speaker, I keep hearing Liberals use the words open and transparent in this response to the $1 million move. Ironic, given the lack of details provided to Canadians. If the Liberal House Leader is so transparent, can she tell us exactly who she gave this $70,000 to and what the money was supposedly for?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, there have been rules in place on the relocation of public servants and political staff since the 1970s. The current rules that we are following were put in place since 2008, and every minister's office has followed those rules since. I am taking this opportunity to also share with Canadians that Canadians voted for growth of the middle class, a stronger economy, a government that works for Canadians, and that is the work that we are doing, and that is the work that we will continue to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Order. Hello. Honourable member for Desnethe, Mississippi, Churchill River.
Speaker, this Liberal government was elected with a promise that it would respect Indigenous rights and title. They promised a new nation-to-nation relationship, including the adoption and implementation of UNDRIP. They promised that they would meet their constitutional duty to consult and accommodate. The Justice Minister is responsible for ensuring all of these duties are met. But we see these promises being broken and the government once again passing the buck on the duty to consult. Can the Prime Minister confirm that his Justice Minister has a federal duty to consult? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud of our commitment to the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People and everything that means in free, prior, and informed consent. And we are doing everything we can across all government departments and all jurisdictions to honor the implementation of that commitment, and we will get it done. Hear, hear.
The member for Timmins, James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I'm deeply concerned that the Justice Minister is going to ground on her obligation on the duty to consult and whether or not she believes this government is running roughshod over Aboriginal rights with Site C. Her silence suggests that either she, as the Justice Minister of Canada, like the Liberal member for Winnipeg Centre, doesn't agree with her own government, or she's changed her mind. Either way, it's her duty as Justice Minister to stand in this House and tell us if she's done the due diligence to tell us whether or not that Site C dam runs roughshod over Aboriginal rights and the duty to consult. It's a simple question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I would note for the honourable member that at the federal level, the processes related to Site C are overseen by the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency and the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. In the fall of 2014, the former government approved this project subject to a number of legally binding conditions. The project is now in the construction phase. As was outlined in the interim principles we introduced earlier this year, project reviews are continuing within the current legislative framework and in accordance with treaty provisions. This includes not revisiting projects that have been reviewed and approved, and the proponent, going forward, will need to apply with all applicable conditions.
The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the House Leader's non-answer yesterday and today shows the Liberals cannot defend the indefensible. Over $200,000 for two moves, one costing $126,000, is a real insult to all taxpayers. We're going to ask again, Mr. Speaker, because they have a duty to be accountable. Who was reimbursed $126,000 for coming to work for the Prime Minister?
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we have set up a team of Canadians from various regions. They're passionate, they're working hard to deliver the changes that Canadians voted for. They've moved from across the country with their families and children to come and move to Ottawa. And in connection with that process, some staffers received assistance. There are rules in place for moving expenses for public servants and political staff since 1990. The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's office isn't the only one spending a fortune on moving expenses. One of the Foreign Affairs Minister's staffers spent over $119,000 to move to Ottawa. That's a bit less than the Prime Minister's buddy, but I doubt Canadian families will find it any more acceptable. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister tell us whether he personally authorized this overspending, and does he find a $119,000 move to be appropriate? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we followed all the rules put in place by the previous government in 2008. The policy has been in place for years, and we will continue to follow it.
For Barrie, Springwater, or Omadante.
The Prime Minister's silence, Mr. Speaker, speaks volumes. Over $150,000 for Liberal staffers to move to Ottawa and take plush jobs just isn't fair. I'd like the Minister of Innovation to think about the 39,000 self-employed people who went out of business last month alone when he answers this question. Will the Minister admit that this payment is wrong? Yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadians voted for growth of the middle class. Canadians voted for a stronger economy. Canadians voted for a government that works for them, a government that they haven't seen in over a decade. Right. This government is committed to working for middle-class Canadians. This government is committed to growing the economy. We are proud of the work that our government is doing, and we will continue to deliver on our promises. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, or Omadante.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Barrie, Springwater, or Omadante voted for transparency because in my riding, the average salary is $40,000. These are people who actually pay tax. So when the Minister of Innovation spends $113,000 tax dollars to move a single member of staff to Ottawa, I'm speechless. Wow. If the Minister can't admit that this is wrong, will he at least tell us who got the money?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, the fact is that when we came into office, we acted in accordance with the rules set up by a previous government in 2008 for relocation expenses. This has been a long-standing policy, and we will continue to follow it for now. Mr. Speaker, Canadians voted for a stronger middle class. Canadians voted for a government that works for them. Canadians voted and support the investments we have made in Budget 2016. These are investments that will create a stronger economy and support the kind of growth that his constituents need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, this is a historical moment for nuclear disarmament. The UN Secretary General and many countries want to begin negotiations to prohibit nuclear weapons. Shamefully, Canada has voted against this plan. In coming weeks, the government has the opportunity to revisit its decision, so my question is simple. Will the Prime Minister change his mind and vote in favour of nuclear disarmament? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is a deliberate oversimplification. This process failed to bring the states possessing nuclear weapons to the table. As such, it was ineffective. Canada is a long-standing supporter of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, and of course, we will continue to work together towards a world free of nuclear weapons in the most effective manner possible.
Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, two reports this week, one from the Veterans Ombudsman and the other from the Canadian Forces Ombudsman, that call on the government to make compensation fair for wounded veterans and to fix the system. Wounded veterans deserve respect. It is a travesty that this government refuses to take concrete action. Will the minister accept the recommendations in these reports, and will his government work to immediately implement them without dragging veterans into court?
The Honourable Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Well, I thank the Ombudsman and his staff for their dedicated service and their very good report. I always value his feedback. The report makes three key recommendations on items in my mandate. In Budget 2016, we acted upon recommendations from this Ombudsman to increase the disability award, expand access to the permanent impairment allowance, and increase the earnings loss benefit, all measures that the Ombudsman was very supportive of. We will continue to work through the recommendations and make things better for veterans and their families in this country.
Member for Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this month, I had a chance to announce new water and wastewater funding in Brampton South through the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund. The Minister has been advocating strongly for these kind of changes that Canadians can see making a real difference day to day for families. Families in my riding appreciate better floodwater control particularly. Can the Minister update the House on what kind of things he has been doing to invest in communities like Brampton?
The Honourable Minister of Communities and Infrastructure.
I want to thank the Honourable Member from Brampton as well as other members from that community for hosting me there last week. We announced over $5 million towards water and wastewater projects in Brampton, ensuring access to clean and safe drinking water, healthy rivers and lakes. We will also be investing in public transit in Brampton to reduce the commute time for Brampton families as well as improve air quality and strengthen our communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, tens of thousands of Canadian energy workers have lost their jobs. Our economy is losing billions of dollars in wealth because we can't get our oil to markets. And the Liberals have responded by rolling over on Keystone XL's veto, shutting down the Northern Gateway pipeline with their tanker ban, adding a politicized delay to the Trans Mountain approved pipeline, and letting Liberals like Denis Coderre attack Energy East without a response. So, Mr. Speaker, enough is enough. When will this government stand up for energy workers, for Canadian jobs, and for the Canadian economy?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Enough is enough. Of 10 years of failed policy that didn't have 1 kilometre of pipeline taken to Tidewater. The Federal Court of Appeal just told us within the last several weeks that Northern Gateway was going to be in trouble, not because the proponent didn't consult, not because the regulator didn't consult, but that member's government didn't consult. We can do a better job. A better job is to travel across the country, to talk to Canadians, to have an open mind that will lead through better process to a better decision, a decision that that government couldn't make.
For Calgary Mindapore.
Mr. Speaker, under the Conservative government, the Alberta Clipper, the Keystone, the Anchor Loop were all approved and built. Line 9 was reversed, adding $1.25 billion. 1.25 million barrels of capacity a day. Now, Mr. Speaker, he talks about Northern Gateway. This government killed it on day one by announcing through Fiat its northern tanker traffic ban, even though hundreds of tankers come down that route from Alaska, hundreds come into our east coast from foreign countries. So how is this government going to take seriously Northern Gateway when it's already shut it down with its prejudicial tanker ban?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, on January the 27th, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change and I announced a set of interim principles that would govern those projects that are currently under review, which will be followed by an entire modernization of the National Energy Board and other federal agencies, because those agencies under this government did not carry the confidence of Canadians, Mr. Speaker, and if you don't carry the confidence of Canadians, nothing will be built.
The Honourable Member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, late last week, CF Industries cancelled a $105 million expansion project planned for my riding. 500 construction jobs gone due to the carbon scheme the Ontario Liberals brought in. That expansion and all those well-paying jobs will be going to Donaldson, Louisiana, where they don't have job-killing carbon taxes. When will the federal Liberals stop trying to copy failed provincial energy schemes and start keeping jobs on Canadian soil?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, we know that in order to build a strong economy, we have to be serious about protecting the environment, something that the previous government did not understand. And a price on carbon is an essential part of that. It will help us to reduce our emissions, foster innovation, and give businesses the stability that they need to invest, grow, and plan. 80% of Canadians already live in jurisdictions with a price on carbon. We've spent the last 6 months working with provinces and territories to extend that throughout the country. Our immediate focus will remain on taking concrete actions to reduce emissions and to improve the economy.
The Honourable Member, Louis Saint Laurent. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. More than ever, Canadians realize that this government has completely lost control of its public spending. An astronomical deficit, a minister who rents limousines from her Liberal crony, but only stops when she gets caught red-handed. How about that employee of the Prime Minister who asked for $126,000 of reimbursement for moving expenses? Canadians can see that these people are champions for spending their hard-earned money, but it does nothing to create wealth. What is this government's plan to create jobs for all of Canada?
The Minister of Finance.
Monsieur le Président. Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to say that our plan to advance the economy depends on the middle class, and we began by reducing taxes for them. We voted for that plan, and in addition, we put in place the Canada Child Benefit that will help 9 Canadian families out of 10 by putting more money back in their pockets. We are also making investments to increase job growth across the country. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, we are starting to seriously fear that this government will not reach a softwood lumber deal. The workers in the industry are preparing for the worst. In only 3 weeks, Mr. Speaker, this industry may have to deal with major tariffs on lumber exports. These tariffs could jeopardize jobs in the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean and across Canada. Is the minister prepared to help companies pay these new tariffs? What is the government doing to protect our jobs and support our forestry industry? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, once again, this is a priority matter for us, and the opposition knows that. We are engaged in negotiations intensively to find a solution. We have unprecedented cooperation from industry, from the workers. We even went to the Saguenay region this summer and to hear from workers and from the industry, and they know that we're making major efforts. We are going to continue, Mr. Speaker, to reach the best deal possible.
Mr. Speaker, a priority? This government has had nearly 200 days to come up with a deal on softwood, and they are breaking their promise. In less than a month, Canadian forestry companies will be hit with new tariffs and unfair trade measures from the United States. There are tens of thousands of Canadian jobs on the line. Has the minister thrown in the towel? Has she given up on these workers? What is her plan to protect forestry jobs across Canada?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question as well as her work on the Trade Committee. Let me remind her that remind this House, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives failed to initiate any negotiations or reach any new agreement. On the contrary, we've been working hard from the outset to gain the confidence of the industry, to understand the nuances of the Canadian industry from coast to coast to coast. We are working hard at our negotiations, and Mr. Speaker, we hope to reach the best negotiated settlement possible. Hear, hear. Thank you.
The honourable member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Well, Mr. Speaker, at the UN, the Prime Minister made it clear that he is willing to put Canadians in harm's way to achieve his political desire for a temporary seat on the UN Security Council. Missions in Africa are dangerous by their very nature. Jihadists in the region have declared that killing UN peacekeepers is their highest priority. How many Canadian lives is the Prime Minister willing to risk for his own personal aspirations and political gain?
Hear, hear.
The Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, the previous government closed their eyes to the atrocities in Africa. They closed their eyes to the fight against disease, basically the root cause that causes the young folks to be actually radicalized and join those groups. We need to do our part. We will have a whole of government approach to peace operations. Canadian Armed Forces will do their part. They've been proud of their work from previous missions all the way from back in Cyprus to Sinai, and they will be proud of the work that they will continue to do in Africa as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the consensus is clear. Distinguished General Louis McKenzie acknowledged that there's no peace to keep in Africa. Retired General Romeo Dallaire told the Senate that Canadian troops don't like to work for the UN. Former Chief of Defence Staff Rick Hillier said it was almost criminal to put Canadian troops under UN command. As a decorated veteran, why isn't the Defence Minister listening to these generals and standing up for our troops?
Hear, hear. Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Speaker, I've actually applaud and honor the great work that the previous generals have done, but I take advice from my Chief of Defence Staff, General Jonathan Vance, and he is with exceptional operational experience, and I can assure you our troops are very proud of their work, and they will do wonderful work in Africa and make a massive contribution like they've always done in every mission that we have sent them on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the military forces don't like to work for the UN. Retired General Romeo Dallaire told that to the Senate. There's no integrated command, and when things go wrong, they're on the front lines, powerless to act, and yet the government is going to deploy 600 soldiers to Africa on a UN-controlled mission. Will the Prime Minister admit that he's using our forces as a bargaining chip to win a seat on the UN Security Council?
Thanks.
Mr. Speaker, we have learned from the mistake of the past. We need to make sure that we have a robust mandate. That's one of the reasons I actually took retired General Romeo Dallaire with me to Africa for this very reason. Also, Madam Louise Arbour as well, to making sure that I got the right perspective on this, to making sure that when we look at a mission, we will have the appropriate United Nations mandate with robust rules of engagement that has the protection of civilians, to making sure that our troops are properly trained, properly equipped, so they can actually make the contribution that we send them there for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Sackville, Preston, Chesapeake.
Mr. Speaker, The strength and vitality of our official languages are a priority for Canadians and for our government. During the summer, the Minister of Canadian Heritage and her parliamentary secretary traveled across the country to exchange with citizens with a view to creating a new government action plan on official languages. Can the Minister update us on the progress of this file, which is so important for our communities? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for Sackville-Preston-Chesapeake Cook, for his question. Both our official languages are a priority for us, and I'm proud to be part of a government that puts this file first. We have conducted consultations in over 20 communities across the country with 3,000 people. We have had online consultations as well, and these consultations are open and transparent contrary to how they were conducted in the past. We hope that all parliamentarians here will participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For over 140 years, Atlantic Canada has been represented on the Supreme Court. It's a constitutional convention, but it's the appropriate and right thing to do, and every Prime Minister since Confederation has supported it, with the exception of this Prime Minister. But my question's not for him. It's for the Minister of Fisheries, who's been in this House for 16 years representing New Brunswick. Is he prepared to stand up and do the right thing for New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada? I'd like to know.
Order. The Honourable Minister of Justice. Order. My Lord.
I'd like to
order.
For the
Order. The Honourable Minister of Justice has the floor.
I'd like to thank the member for the question and certainly recognize the importance that appointing the next Supreme Court Justice places upon the Prime Minister. That is why I was very proud when he introduced a new process to make it more open, more accountable, to ensure that we recognize and uphold the highest quality jurists, recognize the importance of regional representation, functional bilingualism, and look to ensure that we can do as much as we can to improve the diversity on the highest court. I look forward to working with the panel to put forward recommendations.
Député de Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, after close to a year in power, the independent appointment process, announced with great fanfare by the government, is stuck in a Liberal limbo of selfies and chronic consultitis. For 15 months, the position of Vice Chair Broadcasting has been vacant at the CRTC, just like a position on the CBC Board of Directors. We need someone who cares about our public broadcaster on the Board of Directors. And for these consultations, the Minister has said that everything is on the table. But what about around the table? Aren't there some important guests missing? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. But I would just like to remind him of the fact that the position for the Commissioner was posted in the summer, and I would ask him to consult the site. But I would also like to say that over the next weeks, we'll have the opportunity to present the new process of consultation, which will include the appointment process. It will be open and transparent. And we want to respect the independence of the Board of Directors of the corporation.
Mr. Speaker, antimicrobial resistance has become one of the biggest threats to global health. All around the world, including here in Canada, many common infections are becoming resistant to the antimicrobial medicines that treat them. Global leaders are meeting today at the United Nations to discuss this threat to human health. Will the Minister of Health inform this House what our government is doing to address this very serious threat?
The Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for Kitchener Centre for this very important question. Antimicrobial resistance is a serious global public health threat, and Canada is taking action. We're taking a One Health approach to strengthen surveillance, to build laboratory capacity, and to support the development of new treatments, diagnostics, preventative measures, and systems. We're working closely with the provinces and territories, and we're coordinating efforts across human and animal health and agri-food sectors to prevent and control antimicrobial resistance. Thank you.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians learned yesterday that the Liberals' ill-advised quest to normalise relations with Iran has notched up now to the ministerial level. The minister tweeted that in his first meeting with the regime's foreign minister at the UN, bilateral issues were discussed in the context of the Middle East. As an afterthought, the tweet said, consular cases were discussed. Not a word, Mr. Speaker, about Canada's concern over the illegal detention, isolation and abuse of Canadian Professor Hoodfar in Tehran's Evin prison. Why not?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada's severing of ties with Iran had no positive consequences for anyone, not Canadians, not Iranians, and not our allies such as Israel. The first meeting the honourable member referred to between foreign ministers touched on pressing regional issues and consular cases, further emphasizing the value and the need for engagement. Diplomatic solutions for humanitarian and security challenges depend on our regional dialogues. They depend on open conversation with one another. Our strategy of cautious engagement is a tough path. It's much more difficult than a policy of retreat and isolationism. Thank you.
The honourable member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. The Minister is aware that Nunavut has very limited base infrastructure and a huge infrastructure deficit. This government committed to improving the way of life in the North and strengthening our northern communities in a joint statement on Arctic leadership by the Prime Minister and President Obama. I would like to ask the Minister what his plans are for infrastructure funding in Nunavut on projects like the Manitoba-Kivalliq Road, but specifically, what is the status of funding for the Grays Bay Road and Port project? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank the honourable member for his question. I'm proud to say, Mr. Speaker, that over the summer months we concluded our bilateral agreements for infrastructure investments with all provinces and territories, including Nunavut. And we have announced more than $92 million in federal funding for projects in Nunavut in the last few months. As far as the Grays Bay project is concerned, it is not at a stage where it can move forward, but I'll continue to work with the territory of Nunavut to make sure that.
There have been discussions among representatives of the parties in the House, and I understand that we will now proceed to tributes to our late colleague, the Honourable Maurice Bélanger. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honour Maurice Bélanger, a colleague and especially a friend who left us far too soon. August 16th, 2016 was a sad day for our parliamentary family. That day we lost one of our own following his courageous fight against amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's not easy to sum up the enormous contribution that Maurice Bélanger made to Canada in the many years that he sat in this House. But when I think of Maurice, of who he was, my memories always come back to this. Maurice was a defender of his community, a champion of equality, a proud Franco-Ontarian, a hard-working, passionate parliamentarian, an admired party member, and, above all, a man devoted to his family. Today, I would like